continuation hearing. So I'll start by reading the agenda and the public hearing for tonight. In accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 11, notice is hereby given that the Bolton Zoning Board of Appeals will have a continuation of a public hearing on Monday, November 26, 2018 at 7 p.m. in the Houghton Building at 697 Main Street, Bolton, Mass. to hear and act upon the application of Still River Road Development LLC in Deshaney's and Farrell, BC. The applicant is seeking a comprehensive permit for proposed housing development located in Bolton's residential district on Still River Road, identified on Assessors Map DB as parcel 32.68 acres. The applicant is seeking a comprehensive permit to construct 8 units of homeownership housing pursuant to NGL Chapter 40B. The development will consist of 4 2-unit duplex-style buildings located on 2 lots, each containing 2 duplex buildings. In conformance with Mass General Law Chapter 40B, the development will contain 2 affordable units. And the agenda topics for tonight include the following: project update from the applicant, Horsley Witten peer review and applicant's responses, and review of town and department comments. So that's the plan. It may alter slightly depending on the first topic, updates from the applicant, and we'll go from there. So there's someone from the applicant?
Yes, good evening, members of the board. For the record, my name is attorney Melissa Robbins. I'm from the law firm of Deshaney and Farrell. I'm here tonight for Doug Deshaney, who was unable to attend. We are here tonight. We don't have much of an update, but we did want to come as a courtesy. We thank the board for scheduling this just a week out. We wanted to give the board an update. I know that the board, as well as ourselves, got lots of comments today and over the last week about the development. We are in receipt of the Horsley Witten letter from October 11th, and we actually had a meeting with Horsley Witten. I was not in attendance, but the engineers and Erica were in attendance, where they reviewed the Horsley Witten letter. There was some discussions, and our engineer, as a result of that meeting, is working on revisions to the plan set and written responses to the Horsley Witten letter. We also, since the Horsley Witten meeting, have gone out and done soils, some additional soil samples. So right now we are in the process of revising the plan set, so unfortunately we do not have responses to that Horsley Witten letter yet, as we do not have updated plans. We are in receipt of the planning board comments, which were finalized today, as well as some additional abutter comments, comments from the DPW, and some additional comments from, I believe, the Conservation Commission. Obviously, we have not had an opportunity to review or respond to those comment letters yet. We also have received, since the last meeting, lots of written comments from the abutters, which I think a lot of the same concerns will be dealt with when we formally respond in writing to the Horsley Witten letter. But we did want to come tonight to give the board an update, and also to see if the board had any additional comments that they would like us to address during this period. And then when we come back at the next meeting, we will have additional responses to the Horsley Witten letter, and hopefully can give all written comments to the other board and department letters for the board. But again, we're here to answer any other outstanding question the board may have. If there's any additional comments the board would like us to review during this period, we're happy to answer those questions.
So when do you think that we'll have revised documentation?
We expect to be able to reply to the Horsley Witten letter within the next couple of weeks. I expect that they're going to need a little bit of time to review that as well prior to your next meeting.
Because procedurally, we'll get updates and theoretically to the application if there's your plans, and we'll then have to get that back out to the departments. I mean, I don't want to, spend lengthy times on what we received today if things are going to change,
right?
And have people have to do the work more than one and a half times. So I wanted to be efficient, but we also have a time deadline in that we have to then continue hearing. So if we have a rough idea of when we're going to have updates, we can, I'll say it'll be almost December. We're in December pretty soon, and depending on holidays and people's schedules, do we get a meeting in by the time we have updated information, and then we have June 3rd March, and then we have technically a March deadline, end of March, to conclude on this to be in compliance with the Mass General Law on the 40B process. So, it's contingent upon sort of you guys getting us some information in some time of fashion.
Right. So would the expectation be that the plans would be done the week of December 10th?
That seems reasonable.
Right, so if our plans are submitted the week of December 10th, that gives, that's a full week of December, and then another week before, does the board usually meet on,
So we're ad hoc.
Okay.
We don't have a scheduled weekly meeting, so
Okay.
As applications come in for 40A items or 40B matters, we then schedule hearings, so.
okay.
um,
So if the board, I would think that if we submitted early in that week on the 10th, Horsley Witten would have that full week to review as well as a partial week on the 17th in order to respond to the comments, and then we could have a meeting possibly the 20th. That would be,
That's usually a problem because we have people that are traveling and.
sure, well, that's why I wasn't going to say the following week, because I figured that week would be out of question, and I'm not sure about the week after that. So that would be really I would think the earliest that we could get a response. If we submit, and on the 10th, and we give Horsley Witten at least a week to review, then we're into that week.
Right.
Guess we'll have to see how it goes.
But to that point, we would have to continue this year.
Right, we can
It's a
continue.
date of time, so we'd
Right.
have to pick a date.
If we
Looks like-
continued though to a date certain and we felt as though we weren't ready to respond to the Horsley Witten letter or did not have responses, we would continue that hearing. The only reason we didn't continue the meeting this evening is we thought that we would at least give the board an update, and as a courtesy, since this board scheduled another meeting just a week apart from their last meeting, we at least wanted to come and give an update and see if the board had any additional comments for us to review during this time period, since we will be making changes to the plan and responding.
Right.
So if we did go a date certain, we'd be happy to continue if we weren't ready, and Erica's been great to work with for those types of scheduling issues.
Right. So I guess from my perspective, I'll confirm with Erica that all department comments that we've received to date have been provided to,
Yes, so as I provided
because some
to the
came in
board.
just today. We always seem to get flurry the day of the meeting, so
Yeah.
while we can peruse them, we haven't really had anyone
Of
have a
course.
chance to look at them. And I don't know if anyone in the audience is here from boards that would want to present their comments or not, but that's a separate topic. But and then all the other comments that they've been provided to the applicant.
Yes.
So that we can be sure that, so to the comment about what we expect, then we confirm that you've received all comments from the boards to date and all of other comments.
Yes.
then, The expectation would be at the next hearing to be able to come and, one, be able to address Horsley Witten, and
Yes.
then these comments, some of them seem to be significant, or certainly significant on both boards and abutters. So there's a lot of weight, it looks like, to address some of those concerns.
Right, that would be our expectation as well, is that we would want to respond to those all at once. Certainly the Horsley Witten, all of the department head meetings and department head comments, the board comments, and then a lot of the comments from the abutters actually fit under a lot of the comments that the board and other departments and Horsley Witten has made. So those can be addressed at the same time. That would be our expectation as well.
Okay.
Again, if the board is comfortable making a meeting that week of the 17th with an expectation that we get the comments into Horsley Witten early in the week on the 10th, if we're not ready, we will continue. And we did send courtesy notices to the abutters, and if for any reason we did continue that meeting, we would send them out as well.
I can send that week. I'd rather.
What,
And
do
17th.
you have a target date that you're available? Because I know you travel, I know you have some health issues.
Well, but I won't be that till next year. So it would be up to the four of you to agree on something, and then I would review the notes of that meeting and then be available at future meetings.
Okay, yeah. So,
17th works for me.
Is the 17th of Monday?
17th is Monday.
Okay.
17th, 18th, 19th.
I'm not sure yet.
Yeah. So we could schedule, and then, as I said, depending on if they're even available, but.
I guess we can schedule, I may not, I have some business issues that may or may not gel then, so. Anyway.
Danny, when will you be back in January?
I don't know, depending on the recovery.
Okay.
Again, Mr. Chair, if there were a quorum issue that we continued to, and we found that we had to continue and we got close to the date, I'd again be happy to send out a courtesy notice to the abutters and we could reschedule to a date we could have quorum.
Yeah. Well, we unusual circumstance with Andy, he'll have having some surgery, and then, so the rest of us, like, I'm available that week. I don't know, okay?
I'm not 100% sure, but I do have good availability in that timeframe.
Okay, so likely we'll have availability. We could target a meeting, and then.
Yeah, you can target, I mean, I think it depends on.
Earlier in the
when-
week, you're
yeah.
right, earlier in the week is better for you, or if you have availability?
Probably, I'm guessing, you know, I have a couple of jobs with Boston and they get me messed up. Anyway,
So, should we target the 17th?
you can
The
target.
target it,
Yeah,
yeah.
and maybe it might fall apart, but.
Right, well, everyone, like anything else, will just have to give us, they'll have to give us feedback if they can meet that 10th deadline to get to us, and listen, and then see if we can have them be available for the 10th, the 17th, so.
Right. And if for any reason we weren't ready to respond at that time, we would continue. So the next, whatever next meeting we have should be a very, very productive one.
Right.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I have a conflict on the 17th.
Okay.
To the degree the board thinks it's important for me to be here. I don't know if there's another date that week that's.
18th and 19th, I mean, I don't want to push it.
Those are fine.
18th is also fine for us.
Yeah.
All right, so let's, for sure, so let's, can we look to the 18th at 7 PM?
Well, let's go for it.
In terms of meeting space, on the 18th, the town hall's available, but
Okay.
Holton is not. I know
Okay.
most likely to get letters.
Right, but,
But the 19th,
The 19th, excuse me?
what about the 19th?
The 19th Holton is available.
Is that a Wednesday?
Yeah.
I mean, I can always check to see if the public safety building or the library is available the 18th. And I can always, we can change the location. The 18th.
The 18th is
only
fine,
one.
yes.
Okay,
The 18th
not,
is
but
good.
not the 19th.
Not the 19th.
Okay, so maybe we do that.
So let's
We have
target
to do
the 18th.
Yes.
All right.
at 7 PM? Okay.
Great.
So, with that, I just want to let the butters know, or the people in attendance, some may be butters, some may not. But, so we have received comments from the planning board. And those are dated November 26th, so it's a two-page letter. We have comments from the Department of Public Works on November 21st. We have comments from Bolton's Conservation Trust. We received comments, a couple set of comments mid-September, and then more recent, I think today, from Conservation Commission. And we've received comments from, I believe, it could be from Historical, that came in from Martha Remington, but we also have a letter from the Historical Commission as well. Board of Health weighed in, Fire Department has weighed in, and the Police Department. So we have, we're starting to build a good set of comments from our boards, but again, they likely will have to revise some of their comments potentially if we get updated plans and documentation response to the Boston Witten. And we also had from the town of Harvard's town planner, a set of comments, as well as correspondence from, I want to say it's the town of Harvard's Conservation Commission. So there's quite a lengthy set of documentation that the applicant will need to respond to formally in their letter response to Horsley as well as these comments. So, and then we have had a whole host of comments from abutters throughout the last month up till today. So we're going to have to sort of get, summarize, your comments to me so that we have, when you present at the next meeting, we can have a session where we can speak to the butters directly and say, or send comments and say, this is why we can respond, or why we think we can incorporate into the plan that, or if it's a challenge, we need to know that too, so.
Sure.
Any comments or
I have
or questions for the?
I have a quick question, which is something that I noticed, that's why I went up to look at the plan. You have an 8% grade entering Still River Road, which is a state highway. You have probably a minimum of 24 cars accessing that driveway on a daily basis. When I was on the planning board, we always had a leveling area, particularly when you're entering a major road from a development, and this is a development, not a single driveway. So is there any cure in your plan to level that area so that somebody doesn't come down with an icy road and right into Route 110?
Yeah, so that was actually one of the items that came up in our meeting with Horsley Witten, and we're looking at adding a leveling area in that section as well.
Okay, what does that do to the rest of the slope of the driveway?
That would, we're hoping to maintain the same, and that's going to be part of the plan revisions that we presented to you.
And the width of the road, which is 15 feet, I don't think is adequate for
So
two-way traffic.
We have a 5-foot, it's a 20-foot clear span. That's the thing that the fire department wanted, so we're providing the full 20-foot width, and then it does have 15 feet with a 5-foot hardened shoulder on it. And so we'll note your concern and see if we can address that as well.
I had a question about a couple of pieces I came across. So I'm not sure whether this is from the Conservation Trust or who this came from. It looks like it's an attachment.
From the Conservation
From the Conservation Commission. So the local waiver to the local wetlands bylaw in the town of Bolton should not be allowed for the following reasons. One of the bullet points in this says that the ZBA sits as the Conservation Commission acting under local wetlands bylaw authority during comprehensive permit process. So, and then there's a letter from Hancock Associates that says that Horsley Witten Group has provided initial review. The letter recommends the applicant revisit the wetland delineation, and that's outside the jurisdiction of the Board of Appeals. So I'm a little unclear about what is within our purview and what's not.
I can go with it. So as far as,
for the audience,
for the audience, Joe Pesnola from Hancock Associates, I'm the board's housing advisor from Mass Housing Partnership. The jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission has to do with the State Wetlands Protection Act. And I see the delineation of the wetlands as being part and parcel to that. That the Conservation Commission has already issued an order for the property for another project. The applicant used that, but there came into question on a site walk with Horsley Witten the delineation. So they offered input to the Conservation Commission that there's new information, and under the Wetlands Protection Act there's an ability to revisit maybe that wetlands line. So what my comment meant was, with regard to the delineation, that is the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission under the Wetlands Protection Act. Where is the wetlands line? So where the board comes in is under the local wetlands bylaw and the no disturb zone and the waiver they may need from encroaching into that non-disturb zone. That's a local issue. That's a local bylaw or defined under the comprehensive permit law as a local concern. And the commission, this board sits in the commission's shoes as far as reviewing whether or not that's appropriate, whether or not that is a local concern that overcomes the balancing test of the need for affordable housing. And you as a board need to take in all the information that the commission would normally take in looking at that. There might be different criteria under the comprehensive permit law as far as whether to grant that, where the Conservation Commission would look at it maybe a little bit different, just because of the balancing test I described last time. But you're also going to need the input of the Conservation Commission and as much of their experience and knowledge and input as possible with that regard.
And Ms. Donor, if I may, in addition to what Mr. Pesnola said, one of the comments, and I think it was actually from Horsley Witten, had requested that we specify in more detail what waivers we were looking for and answered some of those concerns for the board, and we will be doing that as part of our response letter to Horsley Witten. So some of those questions you just asked will be answered.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the interest of, I guess, time, and I don't want to waste people's time, and assuming we're going to have more pertinent current data at the next hearing,
Yeah.
I think we should have a motion to continue the hearing till December 18th at 7 p.m. But we can, before we do that, if there's questions, to
I do.
Okay.
I have a question. It's actually a follow-up question to Mr. Pesnolas.
And you're, just for that.
Sorry, Anastasia Downey, Still River Road.
Okay.
My question is, I think, I'm going to ask it to you guys, but
Yep.
you may refer to Ducharme Gillis or Mr.
Yep.
Pesnolas. He had mentioned that the construction of this project was built off of, I think was the terms he used, was built off of the original order of conditions. And therefore this idea of is there a take or a no take on certain lands, or where's the delineation of the wetlands. I've heard a couple of times in a couple of different meetings that question coming up. And so my question to Ducharme Gillis, because if I'm looking at the old order of conditions, there's like a 40-something thousand square foot footprint. And then if I look in the new, most recent comprehensive permit application, it's up to 45,000, I think. And please feel free to correct me, but there was a discrepancy there, and the site area had been raised in its square footage. And so my question is just, quite simply, are we dealing with the exact same footprint, or has there been a change?
If I can address that to the board. There is a slight,
Just for the audience, I don't know, just remind who you are.
oh, I'm sorry, Seth Donahoe with Ducharme Gillis. And there is a slight change in the footprint of the project, the 45,000 number in round numbers, that is very accurate. And one of the first things that we did prior to approaching your board, Attorney Robbins' office approached NHESP, because this is within their jurisdiction as well, and to see if this was something that they would need additional work on. They did not have a problem with the change. It's fully acknowledged that we will have to apply with them again after this process.
So what will happen at that time is we'll actually file completely with the new plan to Natural Heritage, and they will then make a formal determination of whether it's a take or no take. We have a preliminary determination right now that it's an insubstantial change to our prior application. So the formal process will be done after we're done this process.
So when you say preliminary approval, or was that a verbal approval, or do you have something in writing?
It would, yes, it would. I believe, go ahead.
I can't, if I'm wrong, I'll correct myself prior to the next meeting, but I believe it was an email. They'll generally give an informal, if you give them a general area, when you already have a permit, you can say, we're going to go outside of this area, these are the types of work we're going to do, this is the type of areas, and they can make a preliminary determination based on the information you give them of whether or not it would be a substantial change, and whether or not they think that you should go through a formal process now.
Okay.
And they did not make that determination when I gave them the preliminary information, but that doesn't mean that bypasses the formal process once we're all done here. We'll
Right.
still have to go through that. We just take the risk at this point that that they might change their mind. But we're pretty comfortable with the fact that they won't.
So does that process, when you say we go to that process when we're all done here, is that after a decision's made, or is that before?
You can do it at any time. It's once you get comfortable enough that the plan is final. So if we're a couple meetings now ahead, we're in January or February, we feel pretty comfortable with the fact that the substantial area of the plan is not gonna change, that it won't affect our outlying work area, then we might apply to natural heritage at that point, and then know that we may have to update our plans once they're completely final.
If I could just add, this is a perfect example in that we are making some changes to the plans at this point. So had we filed with Natural Heritage right away, we'd be doing that again too. So the point is to get it to a point where we're all comfortable with it, so then that we can formally apply for that permit.
Because none of the work here actually circumvents any, this is a state requirement, and we have to comply with all state requirements. This board cannot waive that, so we know that we have to comply with that regulation.
So do we have to have that compliance documented before the 40B process were to finalize?
No.
Follow-up question. So in regards to, I think, Mr. Starr had referenced this question earlier. The DEP, who has not seen anything on this project yet, as far as I know, and they have, I talked to them today, so I'm fairly confident in saying that. Is it their purview to redelineate the wetlands if that becomes a question? Is that the Conservation Commission? Is that the, I guess, and maybe this is a question for Mr. Pesanola, but I'm asking the same question I think that you guys are asking. As we go through this process, you're almost putting the chicken before the egg, or vice versa, where you're gonna, I can appreciate what you're saying, you don't want to redo plans 100 times and resubmit, but at the same time, wouldn't it behoove you to have all of the information from DEP and Natural Heritage to say, yes, this is, or no, this is going to be a take? It would solidify your plans. Whereas if they say, this is, you're taking wetlands now, or you have to, recreate them somewhere, or, oh, we're actually going to redelineate your wetlands, and that's not saying you guys didn't do good work the first time around, but just saying, if the site's changing, wouldn't you want DEP to weigh in prior to it? Isn't that important information for your board to have before you weigh in?
Couple of points here. First, as far as DEP is concerned, DEP is not involved.
Okay.
The Conservation Commission under the State Wetlands Protection Act is the administrator of the Wetlands Protection Act for the state. It's only if someone was aggrieved at a decision of the Conservation Commission, it would be appealed to DEP. Now, DEP is copied on the application to the Conservation Commission, and they do comment during issuance of a DEP file number, which every project that has wetlands work gets a DEP file number. That said, the comprehensive permit process envisions the submission of preliminary information. Many times that preliminary information is not sufficient to support formal applications to the Conservation Commission or the Board of Health or state agencies such as Natural Heritage and Endangered Species. So the concept there is to let the project evolve through the comprehensive permit. So it is appropriate for them to be here in advance of that, and it's the norm, if you will. With regard to the delineation, there is a process called an abbreviated notice of resource area delineation that would go to the Conservation Commission that reviews just the wetlands line and doesn't look at any of the project particulars. It's just about approving the line. That process is afforded to them, and they could, since the line has been put in question, they could go apply to the Conservation Commission, and they have sufficient information now if they've addressed the question of the delineation, and reflagged that area and surveyed that, then they would have enough information to just go get that approved. And then that's, to your point, that's a good idea to have the base information done, and that's something that's routinely done. I don't know where the applicant lies with regards to the claim that's been made by your agent and the town's consultant, Ms. Ball from Worsley Witten with regards to the wetland delineation, and if they are in fact assenting to there being a difference, are they reflagging that, and what is their process? That would be something they could answer.
And that's one of the things we're actually working through right now, so we'll have a response to that for the next board meeting.
I believe in one of the set of comments, there was that request for that.
And
red.
Yeah.
So.
That was one of the Horsley Witten comments, yeah, so we're
But I
we're
think
working
it's
through
also,
that.
I think one of the planning or conservation had requested that as well, so again.
Yes, I actually don't recall which one it was in, but we have seen it in a couple different comment letters, yes.
Those common themes which are important, if they're important to the boards, certainly we're acting as that group to sort of take all those comments, so we formal responses to those.
Absolutely, and we intend on having responses to those.
Thank you.
Any other questions, just in general?
Yeah, just a general question. All the reports, all the comments that you've received from the various parties who have expressed an interest in the process, are those public comments, and do we as town citizens have the opportunity to review those comments before they are responded to by the attorneys?
Sorry, can you, I don't,
Introduce yourself, please.
well, yeah, just a comment. So could you just identify?
I'm sorry, Cindy Fuse, Vaughan Hill Road.
Thanks.
Sorry, you've been compiling, right? Is there access for the town to get access to the abutter comments?
Yeah, so it is public record, so if you're interested in seeing them, you can stop by my office and I can, show you a copy of what's been submitted today.
And that would include the reports by Conservation Commission and all these other, the
Yeah, and
fire
what I'll do
department, et
is,
cetera?
just to make it easier too, what I'll do is, in regards to the department comments and the comments we received from the town of Harvard, and I think Horsley's already on the website, I'll make sure that all gets posted to the ZBA's webpage, so that way you can just download it.
That would be great.
But the abutters comments, I feel a little more sensitive to those, so if you want to stop by my office, you can review them there, so.
Okay.
Okay. Does that plan work? Yeah, of course. And I do want to acknowledge the abutters who are sending in some very detailed comments and observations to the board. So if they were just one-off emails with quick, we maybe probably address some of them, but because of the detail and some of the technical questions being asked, I think it behooves us to have the applicant incorporate those responses, because as a board, or as an individual on the board, I don't feel that I can respond without the advice from either our peer review or the applicant, so. Questions?
Just have a couple of questions. Robin Chicarello, 305 Long Hill Road. On the plans, there is no information at all on any of the plans or paperwork about the other stream that runs along between our property and their property. And I didn't know if that was, why that was not included.
So, is there a secondary stream that should be included on the plans that isn't?
We are reassessing, in response to the Horsley letter, reassessing the entire area to the rear of the project. To my knowledge, there's not a stream there. Perennial streams, one of the primary ways to show them if they are indeed perennial is if they're mapped on the USGS map, and the current USGS map does not show a perennial stream in that area. Doesn't mean there's not a stream, an intermittent stream in that area, and if it's on our property, we'll certainly do our best to locate that.
It could also be a perennial stream that hasn't been identified correctly as well.
It's correct.
And the stream that they're calling intermittent, it was already stated as a perennial stream, so I don't know how that got changed.
So, I guess that's all subject to update or revision as you respond to what's written?
Correct.
Yeah, so, yeah. And you'll see it in the other comments, so to the extent, if you omit it, for the reason, because it doesn't fit whatever they're in, is highlight why it's not there if it isn't able to be put on the plans.
We did send pictures and some videos to show
Yeah.
how the
Yeah.
streams are running.
Yeah.
I also had another statement about when we purchased our home, we didn't build our home in the buffer zone. Their property is all in the buffer zone. And we followed any ordinances. Mr. Pace brought it up to Joe at the planning board last week. We didn't need to reapply. We followed the orders about the wetland protection and the turtle protection and migration. And they know the delicate property that this is. And Mr. Pace at the planning board meeting knows all about it, knew it when he bought the piece of property, all the information was there, and he knows all the concerns that the town has on this piece of property in the wetlands and the resource area and the animals. It's been documented, not estimated, there's documentation on it. And, you know, if he's going to just said he would deny it, that he would appeal it. I mean, I just don't think that that's the way to go into this delicate piece of property. And it's changed in the last year that we've lived there, the amount of water that's not up to our property, we're higher elevated, but, and we're not in the buffer zone, but outside of the buffer zone, there's substantial difference in the water that flows there now. So when they have all these intricate filtration systems, everything's going to be leaching out, I understand that, but it's going into the wetlands. And I don't understand how that can be approved,
So, all this is, all those comments and all that detail is what we're trying to get answers to, so we can make a
I just don't know.
well-documented decision one way or the other as we move through
Right.
the process.
I understand, I just didn't know if that other stream was never mentioned and why that was so.
So if you raised it in there, we need to address that in there.
Okay.
And if it isn't in there, I've asked that they document why, it's, if it's a definition thing or, but. Okay, question here?
Yeah, I'm Jack Whalen, 389 Still River Road in Harvard. I'm the abutter on the Harvard side.
Okay.
So there is conservation land there, and I just wanted to comment just briefly on that stream. It is a perennial stream. I've lived there for 26 years. I have seen it dry up only once. So it's a very small stream, so it doesn't appear at first look that it would be perennial, but it is. And there is a channel that goes through the wetlands there. So so it continues up just around the Harvard-Bolton border, where it meets in the stream that runs through my property, actually. The two come together and flow across the road at that point. So I just wanted to comment on that.
It is the stream,
In your,
Ronabalco Green Road. That stream does filter down into the Nashua River. It's one of the feeders. And it's extremely important that we keep it clean and unpolluted, because the wildlife and everything that's there is a treasure, and we should not be disturbing it at all.
Joseph Rollo, Bar Hill Road. And I guess one of the main questions was, you want to subdivide the lot. The lot just barely passed for single-family home there. Now they want to subdivide the lot into two lots to ask for less waivers. You're on the zoning board, is that lot subdividable into two lots? I mean, if there was a single-family house with two houses there, could you divide that lot with the non-buildable land there to build more than one house on that lot? And then the other question was, I guess that was the main thing, is it's subdividable, because one has less waivers. Is that part of the zoning board? Is that typical, a subdivided lot? That's, and then my other question was,
within the 40B process, there's often they subdivide for, it turns into a condominium type of process. But
Yes,
this board,
this board has the power to subdivide the property in the place of the planning board. and at the same time grant waivers from frontage, area, lot coverage, all of the zoning requirements that would be normal to development under the single-family residential district zoning requirements. It's a comprehensive permit. It blankets everything that's required to build a project under all of the local rules.
Sorry.
Okay, well, we got to follow up. I think, yeah.
So if the zoning board decides that they don't want to subdivide the lot, then was that squash the project, now they have to ask for more waivers? And then also, I was reading somewhere about the order of conditions. I thought you can't have two order conditions open on the same piece of property, so you have to close one down or the new conditions on the new property. So it's approved already, order conditions for the single family. Now, I think you have to close the order conditions down to have it for the different project. It can be two open on the same piece of, on the same parcel of land, is what I understood by my reading.
It's true, but they haven't applied to the Conservation Commission for this project. So they, when, at some point between now and when they start construction, they would be required to go to the Conservation Commission under the State Wetlands Protection Act to get an order of conditions for this project. And the board, the commission will want to see, they'll want to issue what's known as a certificate of compliance for the prior project. And one of the options, it's a strange terminology because it's they're not compliant, they didn't start, but one of the COC options is project was never started. But that closes that out, as you mentioned, and then they can take up the new application. But that's not currently before the commission. They haven't made that application.
So let's make the application for the new project. You close the original project, and then for some reason this project got declined, and the other one's already canceled, so then there's no order condition on the property whatsoever at that point? Or do you keep the one there just in case this fails, and then you get a backup one to fall back on the original house originally? Or is that canceled completely? You know what I'm saying? So
I understand the
Yeah.
question. I just, the process, we haven't had that in front of us in the past,
This,
so.
right, this board needs to be prepared to act in the absence of any application being made under any other state requirement. So they could delay submission of the septic design and the notice of intent to the Conservation Commission under the State Wetlands Protection Act and the MESA actions, the Natural Heritage actions. They could delay all that until this board acts on the comprehensive permit. And this board has to act based on all of the information that's presented to it at that date. So.
thank you.
Okay, well, is that different?
Yeah, that was sufficient.
Okay, that's sufficient. Okay. And you had a question?
Yeah, just one more comment along those lines. With subdividing the property, I just would really request that that this board just look at this as one project with one plan before considering, and don't allow for subdividing the property now. I would say, let's wait and see how this first project works. I think it would be so confusing to have two potential sets of plans, and also the possibility of perhaps two houses on that lot if the land was subdivided, and doing as much damage as this original project could to that very sensitive area. So I would just request that we look at this plan, and then after everything is finished, then consider looking at a second plan with two lots, if that's what the applicant chooses.
Hi, Robin McGraw again, on the road. I just wanted to state also, and I know it's been brought up at other boards, but I don't know if you're aware that, you know, with the order of compliance, they have already gone against the order of compliance by mowing the meadow early without permission, and also mowed onto our property as well.
I did see that in comments that you've provided in the letter, so I would expect that the applicant will address any type of work that was done prematurely. And I know some of the questions you asked in the letter, or you were, I had the recourse of whether it's fine. I don't know if that's the purview of us, so that I'm waiting to hear what the former sons were, why they felt that if they did something that was in advance of, what drove that.
And also as an abutter, we've received one letter this whole time, and it was to an old PO box. So we don't get
Letters recently at all
anybody.
from the abutters, they said they sent them out to the meetings, we never get
We
it.
never got it. We got one, and it came much later than the meeting, and it went to an old PO box we had years ago.
So,
Right.
do they get the abutters addresses from the town, or is that?
They do, so the applicant needs to get a certified abutters from,
Like,
from the
so if
assessor's
you have an
office.
old address, or I
We've been
I would
for
ask you to
over a
make
year,
sure that Eric
Yeah,
has
and
those
they
covered.
had emailed me today about it, so I'm gonna check
Okay.
the abutters list and see what I
All
can
right,
have
so
for
if
them.
anyone has that issue, if they've, addresses have changed or something, be sure that Erica has the most recent, so that we don't have that issue.
Or, Mr. Chair, if I may, if we have non-abutters in the room, out of courtesy, I'm happy, to anybody that's interested to receive the notices, if we do push the meeting, I'm happy to send the notices out when I send the other notices out if we can push. So just make sure Erica has their current addresses, and I'll add them to the current abutters list.
Because I'm sure there's no intent to
No.
not notify, so.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
we've been there for over a year, we're right next door. It's just funny how we don't get the letters, so.
Yeah, we were using the certified abutters list, so.
But again, so
yeah.
if it's
Yep.
based on the certified list, then it's been different, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just as a point of clarification, if I understood, I think somebody said that there was a meeting, not a public meeting, but a meeting with Horsley Witten and the developer. Did I hear that correctly? Like between your last ZBA meeting?
Not with our board, we weren't.
It was between, I
Oh,
think
it was
Erica
the
was
engineer?
there, the Horsley Witten engineer,
Ducharme Dillis.
Ducharme Dillis, and Erica wasn't in attendance, so I don't know who else was there.
The applicant was there, and Rebecca Longball from Conservation was there as well.
Right.
Okay, so there was a meeting that
There was
took
a
place, kind of like
working
a working session. Thank you, exactly. That's what I was
And
thinking.
it was really just to go through the initial comments from Horsley Witten to make sure that Horsley Witten and Ducharme and Dillis were on the same page with what was being requested, and
Great.
just for clarification purposes.
Yep, awesome. No, I just wanted to make sure that if there was anything that came out of that, that would be useful for public knowledge, or for the ZBA board here,
Yeah,
that
I'll-
wasn't a part of it. Is there
In
comments
my-
that?
I had some meeting minutes.
Minutes,
or
yeah,
not
is there meeting
Not meeting minutes, so
Sorry.
it's not technically a public meeting, but I
Right.
had some notes from the working session. I'll go back and look at those and see if there's anything relevant that you guys would be interested in.
I really appreciate
Yeah,
that.
that's fine.
Thank you.
But certainly, it sounds like any type of result of that would be in whatever the revised plans and revised documentation Horsley Witten is going to provide to us, so. So when that comes up, I'll ask Erica at part of the meeting with those key components addressed. Sure. Looks like no hands up, so why don't we entertain a motion to continue it to, I think we talked about the 18th?
Yeah.
7 p.m. Is that
At the town hall.
at Town Hall?
At 7 PM or?
At 7 p.m.?
Do you need a motion?
Yeah.
I'm-
I can vote if you want. Go ahead.
Yeah. I move that we schedule the next continued portion of the hearing to December 18th, 7 PM at where?
Town hall.
Town Hall.
Second. Second by Brian. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So, that's the plan.
Thank you very much.
I will. It's right on my head if you talk to the other cancer.
Yeah, they make sure I have a
Forgotten how to drive on 495.
Oh, hi, how are you? Nice to see you. Sure, of course, Jonathan, nice to see you, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. How's it going? Yeah. Yes, yeah, that's good. This is the third one I've come to. So yeah, I can't make them all, but I want to find the sign-in sheet before somebody takes it away somewhere. It's back. Hi. Make sure you check on that. Still on the road? I know.
You know, and I don't really understand where exactly the septic is located. I know when they come to houses, septic is over there. But you know, I know it's down this
No, but thank you for bringing them.
But I guess I'm going to
Hold on, I'm gonna go get a quick. Let me take a quick picture of that man. Is it gonna get changed again? But you know what, though? I'm totally good. So as long as it's appropriate for me to take a picture. Is this your good work? That's the change as well. I really appreciate it.
The mornings work.
So it says here.
I mean, it says, you have a lot of things up there, but I thought the motion does itself. But it was like
I've never seen it on
I want to be right away.
way too much work. I'm not going to get any more
I've talked about it. So let's get this to the,
I would like it to say changes to the wells and the lot.
So to be, the net constructed well less than 6 feet of the internal property line.
I'm saying
So that's what this year.
on the first sheet to approve it says changes to the wells and associated changes to the lot. Something to that. You know what I'm trying to say? just wanted to make sure that was covered. I mean, we didn't really do
For some reason.
So,
And then I
but
can,
okay,
that's totally fine, yeah.
Yeah.
And then that'll still be our final document. I mean, I can provide it, it's up to you. But he can record it that way.
Can we,
So it's not the same, maybe the same change?
so we need, how many copies?
Just a little bit from here, and I can put that
You want to write, you know, so I'm not, you know, I don't want to rush signing it. It's not-
You didn't look at it previously.
I saw it up here, you know, line to it, so I
Yeah.
didn't even think, I mean, I'd reckon you say here, yeah, I didn't really make that connection. Well, so it's just that, talk about the existing wells, the associated well line.
Right.
On the motion, that motion to approve the proposed changes to the wells and associated changes to the lot lines.
Yes.
So it didn't carry that piece down.
Right.
So what do we say? So, but as long as Mark is, you know, if he says that this is unacceptable, then.
Oh, he's good at that.
Yeah, right.
Do we initial that? Do we initial the change?
Do you like doing that, Sharon, just initialing that change?
This is, you know, what I'm saying.
Is it okay if I take this with me?
Okay, so if you're in agreement with that, then that's.
Yeah.
Sure, you can, I was gonna tab it for you and make it a little more, like, user-friendly, but it's up to you. If that's fine the way it is, I won't do that. And then I was gonna add in our road regs, so there's probably that in the sidebar.
I could print stuff at home. and that's it.
If I'm gonna be at home and not.
I just want to have a hand.
If you come up with a set of tabs, you may want to send them if they're, attorney said you can put them in.
Next time I see you, we can insert.
Well, I actually find that I like to read things on paper rather than on my computer. So today I printed some stuff out. No, that's fine because this is fantastic. Because I like getting it, right? Because when I need to look at this.
No, it's, I would say, I don't.
I saw this and I was so happy. But I might take it too. I might go
It
through.
looked like
But the only thing is if anything new comes in.
Well, I'll just make copies of anything new
Bring it up because I don't want it to
tomorrow
be
on.
questioned
You can
because
read
you
through
know,
it.
someone down the road. Okay, so that goes with that.
Yes, it
Yeah, bring it up. No, I don't think that's it, right?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Second by Kay, all in favor?
All right.